welcome to the channel. I'm back to take a first look at this Week 4 NFL DFS slate on DraftKings and FanDuel. Excited to get into it. Before we do, a quick reminder that if you do enjoy the content at any point in this video, if you could please take a moment to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell. That would be greatly appreciated. Starting to get deeper in the season, get more and more data on these teams. Definitely getting some statistics that we can work off for sure. And if you are interested in getting very serious about NFL DFS, I do offer a premium package that's linked below in the description. You get access to all the same tool videos and building my own NFL DFS lineups. And I've made some big improvements over there as well. Top stacks tools, projected ownership, all of the above. And I got to tell you, the top stacks tool is looking really good. I got to give you guys, I'm just going to go ahead and pull it up from last week. Now keep in mind, this is only one portion of this top stacks tool. I have FanDuel top 2-man stacks, DraftKings top 2-man stacks, FanDuel top 3-man stacks, and DraftKings top 3-man stacks. I'm going to go ahead and just show you guys last week's FanDuel top 2-man stacks. And let me tell you, top stacks were looking really good. I mean, Lamar Jackson and Marquise Hollywood Brown, I mean, he obviously had a terrible week with a lot of drops, but there were lots of opportunities downfield. If you could have just converted on that, would have been a great stack. Justin Herbert and Mike Williams. Mike Williams had a tremendous week, one of the top scoring guys on the slate. We had Josh Allen with Cole Beasley and Emmanuel Sanders. Huge week. If you would have stacked him up, you would have been very happy. And the list goes on. So, I mean, those are the top stacks right there. As far as QB wide receiver, my top stacks duel was right on point. As far as QB running back, Justin Herbert, Austin Eckler, great. Daniel Jones, Saquon Barkley, that would have paid off. Trevor Lawrence, James Robinson, he had a great week. All great plays. And then you go over to the QB tight end position, Lamar Jackson, Mark Andrews, Mahomes, Kelsey, Darren Waller, etc. And then you got defense and running back, Washington football team, Antonio Gibson. The Washington football team's defense is not looking as good as it was expected to be early on the season. I have a feeling that their projections are going to be altered in my system here very soon. And then Mike Williams, Austin Eckler as far as running back wide receiver top stacks, Keenan Allen, Austin Eckler as wide receiver running back. You get the point. The top stacks tool was on point in week 3, and I expect it to be on point going forward. So that's just one portion. We got the projected ownership, you got my rankings, you got cheat sheet, yada, yada, yada over there. Sorry to ramble, had to go over it because things are looking good, things are looking up, and if you want to be part of the KJK DFS premium package team, I'd highly recommend you join it. So, with that being said, let's go to start taking a first look at this week 4 slate. So, as far as Vegas totals here and high totals, we're going to start with the QB position on FanDuel right now. We get it priced as far as the QBs in the top range, lower range, all the above. And it all starts at the top this week with Patrick Mahomes taking on the Philadelphia Eagles with a 54.5 over-under, 30.25 implied total for his team, and a 6-point spread, taking on this Philadelphia secondary, which has looked pretty good on paper. But I will say Monday Night Football, they just got beat up mostly by the run game. But with a high total game, let's be honest, there aren't many teams that can slow down Patrick Mahomes. So in a high total game, you got to have interest in him. On DraftKings, he's priced at 8-1. Over here on FanDuel, he's priced at 8-7. At a 30.25 implied total. And the great thing about stacking up Mr. Patrick Mahomes and this Kansas City Chiefs offense is we know exactly where the ball is going. Pretty straightforward. So if I'm going to the Kansas City Chiefs this week, we know Patrick Mahomes is going to throw the ball a bunch. 44 attempts in last week's game, and I expect that to remain the case. And then as far as the wide receivers, Tyreek Hill going to be getting a bunch of targets his way, of course, and of course Travis Kelce, the three-headed monster sort of deal. So it's very easy to stack this team up as far as knowing where the ball is going. Really the only thing that's going to slow you down would be the price points on these guys, which is understandable, but if we can find some value in our lineups, they're definitely going to make for a tremendous stack in a high total game this week, of course. So Patrick Mahomes at the top. We have Josh Allen after that huge week last week, taking on a Houston Texans team, which is absolutely terrible defensively. Definitely going to be a top guy that we're looking to target. As far as the Texans on the season, they're 11th best to target in terms of points given up to fantasy QBs, 22 fantasy points per game. And definitely a offense that we could be looking to for sure. Really the only problem is if they get up, the game script could maybe go a little bit negatively towards Josh Allen, but we know with how much he runs, I mean, the guy's still going to be involved a bunch. Looking at his total rush share in this offense, he's way up there for league leaders through 3 games played. He accounts for 20.45% of his team's overall rushes. That's pretty dang good for a quarterback, and he's definitely someone that you should be looking to this week. And as mentioned, if there was ever a guy that the game script, when they need to run, couldn't take him out of the game, it might be Josh Allen because he's still capable of running. When typically you would think he's just handing it off to his running back, it might be him running it in for 6 multiple times. So Josh Allen definitely a guy that's going to pique my interest from a first look aspect here. And we have Kyler Murray taking on the LA Rams. 53.5 over under as well. Another high total game. 24 implied total for his team, a 5.5 point spread. This game is expected to stay close. Problem only really is that the Rams have a very good defense. I mean, Kyler Murray's a great quarterback when you're looking at the Rams as far as their ability to slow down the QB position this year. They are ranked 18th as terms of best to target, so it's not like they're 32nd or anything like that, similar to last year. But at the same time, I mean, this Rams secondary is pretty good and not exactly one that I'm looking to target. I mean, some of these cornerbacks have very good player grades as far as from a coverage aspect with guys like Jalen Ramsey back there, David Long Jr., Darius Williams. They do a pretty good job of keeping their wide receivers in check. But if there was ever a QB that I think that could maybe put them up to the test, of course, it would be Kyler Murray. I just tend to think that if there was ever a week to fade him, this might be the one. He's had some big games. This is a high total. His team only has a 24 implied total, though. We talked about two teams already with 30 plus, so maybe not exactly the top guy to be going to. Lamar Jackson has a very difficult matchup this week against the Denver Broncos defense, which has been the best defense against the QB position this year so far. 32nd best team to target, only allowing 11.9 fantasy points per game to QBs. That's very impressive. Jalen Hurts taking on the Kansas City Chiefs after a terrible Monday Night Football performance is in a great bounce-back spot here because he's been great from a fantasy point aspect. He looked absolutely terrible in that Monday night game, and he still somehow was able to rack up 25 DraftKings points. As far as FanDuel is concerned and his scoring that last game, he was able to rack up a total of 22.54. If you watch that game, the fact that he came out of that with that amount of fantasy points is very impressive. The guy literally had like nothing at halftime, and if there's ever a spot from the bounce back, I think it's going to be this one. This Chiefs secondary has been less than impressive to say the least. As far as their ranks on my QB matchup chart, they are the second best team to target in terms of QBs, giving up 25.2 fantasy points per game. And then when you're looking at this secondary as far as these Kansas City Chiefs, not very impressive whatsoever as far as coverage ratings, any of the above. Mike Hughes, Larry Sneed, Javarius Ward, all really bad. All guys that I have no issues with targeting. And we know Jalen Hurts can get the job done on the ground as well. Mobile quarterback, does multiple things. That's the kind of guy that I want to be getting my lineups. I think the fantasy upside is going to be tremendous here, and I think that his stacking options are pretty clear. We know where the ball is going in this Philadelphia offense. They can spread it out a little bit, but overall, like I said, I think it's similar to the Kansas City side of where we know where the ball is going. It's really going to be start on the outside with Devontae Smith at 5'7". He's the guy that we're looking to. 7 targets, 6 targets. Hasn't had the biggest game, but if there was a chance for him to break out, this would be it. Jalen Reagor as well on the outside at 4'7", seeing his targets increase 6'5", 8. And then as far as the tight end position, it's all Dallas Goedert, Zach Ertz, those guys accounting for the targets. So you have plenty of different options as far as stackability, all at different price points. If you need the discount from Goddard to Ertz, you can do that and feel pretty confident about it. And like I said, I just think that game is going to be a great game environment to be getting some exposure to on both sides. So I like that. Matthew Stafford taking on this Arizona Cardinals team this week, similar to the other side, actually, that we discussed about. Plenty of options, plenty of threats. Stafford's been great, but the Arizona Cardinals defense has been pretty good in the secondary. I mean, they're the 22nd best team to target in terms of QBs. The cornerbacks have had some pretty good player grades overall, doing a good job of slowing these guys down. Robert Alford, Byron Murphy Jr. both have great coverage grades according to Pro Football Focus. So not exactly the top guys that I want to be targeting. And I think this Rams-Arizona game has a high total, and if it's going to be getting a lot of traction, I might be a little bit underweight for my first look. I just don't think it's necessarily a spot that I really want to be going all that much, especially when there's other spots that have similar totals that I think we can pivot to. Russell Wilson taking on the San Francisco 49ers could be one of those spots. He was a little bit disappointing last week. I was very high on him, definitely had him in my lineups. He really didn't do all that much. This game has a 52 over-under as far as the implied total for both sides. I mean, Russell Wilson has a 24.75 implied total. We know that both of these defenses aren't exactly the scariest in the world. Looking at the Seattle side as far as how they've done against Seahawks, they're the 17th best team to target overall. And then as far as the San Francisco 49ers, seeing where they come in, they've been the 10th best team to target in terms of points given up to the quarterback position. I think that this secondary isn't all that scary. I I mean, we know the weapons on the outside that Russell Wilson has in this Seattle squad with Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf. Tyler Lockett got a little banged up in last week's game, so it'd be interesting to see if he's going to be fine. I'd expect him to be fine, but keep your eyes on that news. If that's the case, of course, DK Metcalf will become even more viable option, but these guys, I mean, are really matchup-proof, and then when you're factoring down the cornerbacks that they're going to be facing in this game, as far as the 49ers, decent overall, not a completely terrible secondary, but definitely not one that I think that can slow down DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett. So it all starts with Seattle, and then on the other side, if there was ever a spot where we could be targeting Mr. Jimmy Garoppolo, this would be it. As mentioned, we're not all too worried about this Seahawks secondary. Definitely one that I think you can be targeting. They're not exactly the Legion of Boom anymore. And when you're looking at how these guys grade out as far as their ability to slow down the pass, not all too worried about it overall. And I think that Jimmy Garoppolo can go out there and have a pretty good game. Seattle Seahawks secondary really not looking too good overall, with guys like DJ Reed Jr., Trey Flowers, Ugo Amadi, all grading out to be very bad. And Jimmy Garoppolo comes in at a very friendly price tag over here on DraftKings. And as far as FanDuel is concerned, I think you could take a discount on Jimmy G as well. Price all the way down to $7K. So I do think that this is a spot that they could definitely break out. And as far as where the ball is going, we know it's been Deebo Samuel for most of the year. When you look at Ayuk, he was a big disappointment. But look, last week, 6 targets. He got in the end zone for a touchdown, 37 yards. I think that's a step in the right direction here. And I think that you could definitely be pairing up Jimmy G with Brandon Ayuk, etc. As far as the passing game is concerned. No issues with that whatsoever. We have Dallas taking on Carolina, another game with a high total with a 50 over under, 27.25 implied total for the Dallas side. On the other side, the Carolina team might have to make a little bit of an adjustment here with Christian McCaffrey going down with an injury. Maybe put a little bit of a differentiation in their game plan as far as how they have to attack it here, which might make Sam Darnold a bit of a more valid play, on top of the fact that we're not all too scared about this Dallas secondary. I definitely think it could be a viable option to be targeting in the passing game for both sides. You got DJ Moore, who's become a target beast this year. 11 targets, 12 targets the last 2 times out. 21.9, 23.5 DraftKings points. Very impressive performances. And keep in mind, as far as receiving, only one of those games he was able to come down with a touchdown. So, I mean, I think that DJ Moore has some big upside here. And it's definitely a spot that I'd be willing to target him. Carolina, and then Dallas on the other side. Carolina's been a pretty good defense all year, so that's a little bit scary as far as that's concerned. And, it's a little bit of a head scratcher because I don't think they were anticipated to be too high of a good defense this year, but they really have been as far as their ability to slow down quarterbacks. They're the 29th best team to target in terms of QBs. So, it's a little bit scary to be going there and targeting that, but that's just the case. And I definitely think that you could still be doing it. Overall, we got Green Bay, Pittsburgh. That game's going to be kind of mediocre overall. Ryan Tannehill, Taylor Heineke, and the Washington football team taking on the Atlanta Falcons. Both of these teams have been very bad defensively. This is another game that I think we could definitely be talking about. And some that I want to be targeting for sure. Overall, not worried about the ability to slow down the rush. Not worried about the ability to slow down the pass game on either side. And I think that you could definitely be looking to some offense here. And we know where the ball is going on both sides as well. So it's another game where I feel very confident in the stacking ability overall on both sides. We have Antonio Gibson, the pass-catching running back for the Washington football team. As far as the wide receivers, it's really dominated by Calvin Ridley and Terry McLaurin. 10 targets, 11 targets for Mr. Calvin Ridley in these games early on. And then when you go to the other side of Terry McLaurin, it's going to be the same case for him. 14 targets in week 2, 7 targets last week, and a game that was a blowout. I think he could receive a lot more this week. And as far as the secondaries are concerned, it doesn't get much better than this Washington and Atlanta. Both of these secondaries are absolutely terrible. None of them scare me whatsoever. Washington was expected to be one of the best defenses in the league, and their secondary has been absolutely dreadful. William Jackson III, Kendall Fuller, Benjamin St. Just, they're just not getting the job done. And then as far as on the Atlanta side, we already knew they were a bad defense last year, and they definitely are not taking too many strides forward. They got Isaiah Oliver on the outside, who has a pretty good player grade overall, but then Fabian Morrow in the slot, TJ Green, not really good whatsoever. I have to think this is a spot based upon my projections and the just overall matchup. It definitely could grade out to be one of the best game environments on the slate and one that I'd be having interest in. Cleveland at Minnesota is one that I didn't want to skip over as well. That definitely has some shootout potential here with Kirk Cousins, Baker Mayfield on the other side. Both defenses not the most impressive in the world, and this is a game that, as mentioned, definitely has some shootout potential. And then, once again, some very good weapons to be stacking this game up with. As far as the wide receiver position, we have Justin Jefferson, Adam Thielen. Odell Beckham Jr. returning for Cleveland is a huge deal. And once again, you can't ask for a much better matchup. Odell Beckham Jr. is an absolute smash spot this week. I'm sure he's going to garner a lot of ownership, and for good reason. The Minnesota secondary looks absolutely terrible. Rashad Breeland, Patrick Peterson, Mackenzie Alexander have looked very bad. Not worried about it whatsoever. I think Odell Beckham Jr. is in a huge smash spot this week. I definitely have a lot of interest in him, and that's the other game that we'll be looking to a shootout. As far as the running back position, we talked a lot about these offenses. We didn't really talk about the running backs all that much. We talked about stackability. Of course, these running backs, these teams are going to have to run the ball as well. And where am I looking to for my top running back spots? Of course, we're going to want a team that's ahead in the game, try to run the ball more, run some clock. We have the guys in some heavy favorite situations. It all starts at the top with Derrick Henry and Alvin Kamara. Both guys are on teams that are favored pretty heavily here. We have the New York Jets and New York Giants as their opposing teams. 8-point spread, 7.5-point spread. I think that they're going to be great spots. Both guys getting a tremendous amount of share of the offense. Pulling up my snap count data as far as at the running back position to see where these guys fall. As far as their rushing share overall, both are going to be ranked as top running backs. Of course, Derrick Henry, 80.81% of his team's rushes are coming via him. As far as Mr. Alvin Kamara, dealing with 38.8% of his team. 38.8% of the rush snaps he's out there for. 55.32% of his team's runs are going through him. And he's also seeing a 22.95 target share in this offense. 22.95% of the targets are going Alvin Kamara's way. We know he's a pass-catching running back. We know he's capable of definitely getting the job done on the ground. And then as far as the matchup this week in these game environments for both of these guys, I'm not too worried about it whatsoever. The Jets have been the third best team to target in terms of points given up to running backs. And Derrick Henry, if there was ever a guy who'd be getting excited to target, he'd be one of them. And then, of course, the New York Giants, as far as how they fared against the run overall, they've been a little bit better on the season, 19th best team to target, but we know Alvin Kamara's ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. That's a little bit of a different dynamic, and they're going to have to deal with him all weekend long. So both those guys at the top are definitely in great spots. We have Najee Harris taking on the Green Bay Packers. He's been out there for 96.4% of snaps. His team is a 6.5-point underdog as far as this game environment, so that's a little bit of a downside. As far as the Packers overall and their ability to stop the run, they're 12th best team to target, 24.1 fantasy points given up per game. So I definitely think that we could be targeting some Najee Harris, his involvement and all that fun stuff. Of course, he's going to be a guy that you're looking to. He's 6'8" on DraftKings. Over on FanDuel, he's going to be a great play as well. He had 19 targets in last week's matchup. 19 targets, 14 runs. This guy is going to be an absolute workhorse beast. That's just ridiculous. So keep that in mind. He's definitely someone that we're going to be looking to for sure. As far as anyone else with a really good matchup this week and who's really catching my eye, I mean, we talked about that Seattle-San Francisco game. We know Chris Carson's been really good. He's been out there for a bunch of runs. And really, there's a few guys that are really standing out to me from a snap share percentage. We talked about Derrick Henry. We talked about Najee Harris. Chris Carson's getting 65.08% of his team's run share overall, so he's just been an absolute beast. He's another guy you got to be looking to for sure. Hopefully Antonio Gibson's going to get some more snaps. He's a guy that I was really high on last week. He definitely did take a ramp up as far as his team's rush share. Now seeing 60.81% of his team's rushes. He's still accounting for 10.23% of the target share. He's another guy you could definitely be looking to. Clyde Edwards-Helaire, the Kansas City squad. We saw the Cowboys just absolutely run it down the Eagles' throat this past week. If he's another guy that we're looking to as far as that's concerned at his price tag on DraftKings, it wouldn't shock me. He's 5'4". He had 17 attempts last week, 2 targets. Not the greatest game in the world, but as I said, we just saw this Eagles team really struggle. It could be the same case this week. And so that's kind of a first look at some of these running backs that I'm looking to target here. I mean, from a site aspect, on which ones are really standing out the most to me as far as DraftKings is concerned right now. So in my top running backs, I definitely think that Mike Davis in that Atlanta-Washington game is going to stick out a bunch. We talked about that game being maybe a high-scoring game. Chicago at Detroit, this might be a game where finally Chicago can break out. I hope, because the Detroit defense has been absolutely terrible. And for that reason, I think that David Montgomery could definitely be an interesting option, and maybe even the Chicago passing game. We've seen Allen Robinson really struggle early on in the season. There was a lot of talk about Andy Dalton going down and how the replacement was going to go as far as the starting quarterback taking over in Justin Fields. That, of course, didn't really pan out too well last week. His hand isn't guaranteed the starting job now, so it's maybe even looking that like it could be Nick Foles. I mean, this is a whole question mark, I guess, going on for the Chicago Bears. They got Nick Foles, Danny Dalton's day-to-day. They don't really know what's going on, so keep an eye on that QB position. But regardless, David Montgomery, I think, could be a decent option at the running back position. And that's just some of the guys I'm looking to early on here. We have Trey Sermon taking on the Seattle Seahawks. He was a big letdown last week, and he's expected to get a lot of the bulk of the carries, and the Seahawks have been the worst team against the run game this year. So even he can maybe be an interesting option over here on DraftKings specifically. He's priced at a pretty friendly discount here. It's just a matter of the workload and whether he's actually going to get it. Last week we saw 10 attempts for him, 3 targets, not exactly the most impressive in the world. He did have 1 touchdown, but definitely something to keep an eye on going into this week. And that's just kind of a first look, who I'm looking to as far as some of these offenses. From a top stack perspective, from a QB perspective, definitely will have a lot more to go over in my final look video at the end of the week. So with that being said, if you do enjoy the content at any point in this video, if you could please take a moment to leave a like on this video, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. That would be greatly appreciated. That way you don't miss any future content that I upload. And if you are getting very serious about NFL DFS, do make sure that you check out my NFL DFS premium package. Link below in the description. Promise it's going to be well worth the investment. We went over some of those top stacks in week 1. That's just one tool. The one I'm definitely getting the most excited about. I'm getting a lot of good feedback on that. But that's all from me in this first look video. Wish you guys all the best of luck in week 4, and we will see you in the next one.